Justin, welcome to Podcastina.
Thanks for having me, Miss Galina, on Podcastina.
Thank you so much for being here. I just really love your work, and I think it's really relevant to not just content creators, but people in general who may or may not struggle to feel seen, to embody their authentic selves. And so I would love to just start our chat by asking what you think it is that creates blocks to people feeling like they should be seen.
Mm. Creates blocks for people with regards to feeling like they should be seen, in the sense that, um, they owe it to somebody else, or they owe it to themselves, or there's like a narrative, a pervading narrative out there that they should put themselves out there. What do you mean? Because I'm excited to respond, but I want to be really clear about it.
Of course. I think today there's very few businesses, particularly in the entrepreneurial space, that allow you to not have a presence, right? I think for most people, especially in our age group and younger, there's almost this requirement to be seen. And I think that some people kind of move through the world with some kinds of blocks that are like, you know what? Why should it be me? Why should I be the face of anything? Why should I post things that are personal, maybe unrelated to the business? Or why are people just scared to even get started?
Yeah, I understand now. I think there's an interesting avenue that I wasn't going to go down, but given the way that you just reframed it, I think that there's a difference in terms of the quote unquote invitation regarding showing up and being seen, right? So the way you just posed it, for some, they feel it's an obligation. And obligations, whether it's showing up on social media and being seen, or take out the trash, babe, and empty the sink, like we can build resentment to those things quite easily because oftentimes they aren't our idea. They aren't the things that we want to most immediately do. And it feels like something that we have to do. And so I suppose one of my uh, tenets, or one of the reasons that I show up, is reframing this potential obligation, as a person might see it, as an opportunity, instead to, like, yes, the visibility and the platform that you could potentially grow that might catapult you forward in terms of allowing people to know that you do a thing, you offer a thing, you are a thing, whatever. Before that visibility even happens, there's an opportunity for you to leverage these platforms as a tool to just do some self exploration, some self experimentation, some self excavation of who you are. And so I think the blocks are there potentially because of the obligation factor, because people don't immediately recognize that there is a pretty obvious, to me, parallel between real life and social media, but they think that their discomfort on social media is so random. And I'm like, no, you're terrified of being seen in the real world too. Like, this actually isn't that far removed. So the blocks come from where all blocks do, which is our desire to fit in and our primal fear of being cast aside or rejected, right? I think it's compounded because of the expectation, like you're pointing out, and like where we started, about there are fields in which there is sort of an expectation now that if you don't exist on social, do you even exist at all? And I'm not saying I feed into that. I don't love it, but I am saying it is a fact. If you are, I ran into a friend yesterday on the street who's moving into the comedy space, and she was like, "Yeah, I gotta like start posting on TikTok," and I was like, "You really do."
Yeah.
I said, "I wish that wasn't the case, but you really do." And now you do. It's gone are the days when people are scouting people like Miss Maisel in a basement in the Lower East Side of New York City. So, uh, yeah, long-winded answer, but it's a thick topic, right? Because we are talking about showing up as yourself on a platform, or on platforms that don't always feel like they're conducive to doing just that.
Absolutely. There's so many good things in just what you said right there, where it's not necessarily a reflection of, or let me back that up. Trying to be yourself online is directly connected to just being yourself out in the world too. Like there's so much overlap, and even if we're speaking about it out of the context of showing up as yourself online, like there's blocks to showing up as yourself in a boardroom, in a conference, like in a relationship, right? There's so many of these blocks. And it's interesting because with comedy, just as the example, when you start doing stand up, it's pretty normal to see comedians parroting a comedian that they look up to and learning the framework of how to perform and how to write jokes based on the framework of someone who you admire. And then, ironically, the goal is to learn to be yourself on stage. And it's this hard thing that sounds so intuitive, but that ends up taking people the better part of a decade to actually figure out. I wanted to
Mhm.
ask, what are some of the markers that we are being inauthentic? What does that feel like? Because my audience is pretty embodied, I would say, and I think they're pretty good at tapping into their feelings. So, what kinds of feelings are those warning signs that we're showing up inauthentically?
Yeah, well, what's coming up for me is that, and I appreciate sort of the categorization of your audience. That it just helps me understand how to answer this. But I'll also just offer that just because you can tap into your feelings doesn't necessarily mean you're being authentic or inauthentic. It's um, there were plenty of times in my own life when I knew my feelings, but I stepped in and sideswept them in service of doing or saying or being differently than my feelings would have had me act because of the response I wanted to evoke in the other person, i.e., like out of fear, I manipulated my own feelings. And this can happen really quickly and in a really tiny and subtle way. And also, it can become so habitual you don't even feel it, even if you are good at tapping into your feelings or being a sensitive person or being emotional, that you're still operating under or within this schema that you have been operating within for a very long time of just doing what you think will achieve the desirable result in the other person. So I think sometimes just going to like tapping into feelings is not enough because I know plenty of emotional sensitive people who are also deeply inauthentic and wouldn't even recognize that they are being such. I think that one of the ways that I like, obviously, is if you were to try to put yourself on camera, uh, do you go completely blank when you do actually go to hit the big red button and talk to a camera? I'm not even saying with the service. I'm not even saying in service of making that a content piece, but just even talking to the camera is that an incredibly large chasm that it feels that you need to cross because what I've learned is that space feels like it's supposed to be so familiar to us, especially given 2025 and how much tech we're surrounded with all the time. But it is so deeply foreign and uncomfortable for so many people. And that is a huge sign for me of like, okay, cool, you're actually not super comfortable as being in your body or self-generating from a place where you're not receiving stimuli from people around you. I also think that if you were to ever watch back a video of yourself where this goes both ways, but if you were like, oh yeah, I felt really good about that, and you watch it back and you're like, who is that? Like, there's this unbelievable, um, phenotypically, the way that your internal experience represents itself or manifests externally looks entirely other to you. There's a disconnect there. There's still a disconnect between the internal experience of what you feel like it is to be yourself and the external experience of like, your holy fuck, I never realized that's what it is on the outside. Um, I think there's also just a classic one that I hear a lot, but it's worth mentioning. If you are at an event or you're at a party or you're on a date or whatever, and you leave that thing and you're just completely depleted, which is very different than just being fatigued or tired from, you know, being an amplified or animated version of yourself. It's a different emptiness that you feel after like truly mining for oil where there never was any and just coming up empty, but still being expected to show up and perform. Um, and I think just a general malaise and lack of fulfillment in your life. I think if you're unfulfilled, you are doing things ostensibly to be successful or to like live a quote unquote good life that don't actually align with whatever your values are or whatever your authenticity might be. And you're just probably an unhappy person. And I don't mean that in a glib way, although I hear how it could sound that way. But yeah, if you're unhappy, chances are you're off track somewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. Even if you are already at a certain stage with your content creation and you are putting yourself out there, I heard it put before that if people love you for who you're not, you can't really give that love if they're loving some kind of, constructed version of you as opposed to something that feels real to you where you can actually kind of start to let some of that validation sink in. And I can't help but wonder if some of it has to do with whether a person is naturally more introverted or extroverted, but then also Like, I wonder if extroversion online translates similar to how it does in person, feeling depleted after a party or coming home and being like, I want alone time. I wonder how to balance the online persona for someone who's maybe more introverted.
I mean, I'm deeply, deeply, deeply introverted, and so I mean, you got someone right in front of you, right? So, I think to back up for just a second, there's some Venn diagram crossover here. Um, if people love you for who you're not, you can't receive that love. Sometimes it's not obvious to the person who's being handed the love that they're not receiving it, though, is what I'm just offering out loud.
Mm.
Like I've worked with so many clients at this point who on the surface have an understanding or an awareness that something's off and something's not right, but they don't know how deep beneath the surface it goes. But to them, they don't even realize like just how fucked things are, because to them, it would be like a flower thinking that it's totally like taking advantage of all the water that it's being given in a garden, but like it's wilting and wilting and wilting and wilting. And like someone comes along and is like, bitch, you're not doing well. And the sunflower is like, what do you mean? I'm fine. Like it's strange. It's like we become accustomed to whatever sort of the given circumstances are. And when it happens really slowly over time, you don't even see it or experience it. So honestly, the role I sometimes take in my clients' lives or my friends' lives or whatever is I come in and more like brutally reflect back sometimes like what is actually true and what is actually happening. And so I agree, you can't receive love for a version that you're not, but I think most people think they can because they don't even recognize how far away from their quote unquote core selves they've even moved, right? But to read the second point about introversion versus extroversion, um you know, I'm a person who probably would have never thought I was introverted. The first 30 years of my life I was so um, good at doing the gregarious, effusive performance. Although I knew that there was like a quiet person in me. But now, the more true I am to myself and the more centered I feel and the more operating from like a somatically embodied place, like I'm a pretty quiet person, I believe. And I like that actually. I really like being by myself. I'm single. I spend a ton of time alone. Of course, there's downsides to that. The isolation can become not overwhelming, but just like a little too the saturation can be a little too much sometimes of the alone time. So then it's on me to look at the pie chart of my life and be like, okay, well, where is my community? Where's socializing? Where's all these other things? Um, but the interesting thing about social media again is that most of the time, unless you're doing sort of content where you're out at a restaurant or you're doing man on the street stuff or you're doing a podcast interview, like most content is created alone. And so, in an odd way, like I think potentially introverts who are kind of used to sort of refueling on their own have like the tiniest bit of an upper hand, but everyone is equal parts disadvantaged by the fact that it feels deeply foreign to show up in that way anyway. Extroverts, on the other hand, are probably going to want to really connect to an audience that isn't actually there. And that can have them bending over backwards and inhabiting these old habitual sort of constructs that they're so used to doing in life because they are used to wanting that feedback and wanting that energy from others. But both sides come with their own traps they can fall into.
Yeah, I'm similar to you in that way where I didn't realize that I leaned more introverted. I think I oscillate between the two, where if I have been by myself for too long, it starts to kind of like it almost sneaks up on me. It's great until it's not great. But I wanted to go back to what you were saying about people kind of not even understanding that they're not receiving the love. What are some of the more common harsh truths you've had to give people you've worked with?
Oh my God. I mean, like, it's funny because it, harshness, even in and of itself, as this barometer is so interesting to me because, like, if a truth is accurate and it grants you clarity, like, is it not the kindest truth one can hand someone, right? But I suppose there are things that have flown out of my mouth with, like, of course, matter of factness that the person is like. And so even earlier this week, I can recall several conversations, not to choose just one, but where I said to a person, I said, I'm trying to get a sense if you would experience joy if you were to show up and actually create content. And then she was sitting there and she was about to answer. And I said, no, sorry. I'm trying to actually understand if you would allow yourself to feel the joy that I know you would feel if you showed up to create content, because I know you would enjoy it. I just can't tell if you'd let yourself have it or not.
Mm.
And it came out of my mouth just like that. And she was just like, it totally took her off. And I thought it was so funny. I mean, in the moment, I was so present and whatever. But upon reflection, I was like, oh, I guess that was like really reading her for filth, because it was clear to me I was sitting with somebody who has, and this is not just this person, it's a lot of people I work with. Um, they ration their joy, right? It's like, and I'm a person who does this too. I don't allow myself to experience like overwhelming happiness frequently. I don't know why I feel I have to earn it all the time, but I often see the things in other people that we are ourselves, right? We are all sort of reflections of each other. Um, so that's an example of just like I saw it, I called it out, and she was like, okay. But I mean, I offer things up to people constantly. I mean, like it's just in how I hear people, it's how I read people. I feel like I hear people what they're saying on the surface, like what their actual words are that they hand me, but I'm also really always kind of floating in this meta space where I can like hear their sentence structure as well. And like I'm always doing a great deal of math in my head, whether I want to or not. And that's just always been who I am. And I can know people very deeply because of that. Um, and it catches people off guard, but like I kind of love it, like my little party trick.
It's very valuable to put it that way. It's funny you used that example of like a harsh truth because my therapist hit me with something very similar just in our last chat. I wasn't going to talk about this, but it kind of leads into what I wanted to ask about anyway. But we were talking about me expecting these external validation points from doing this show and me just kind of hammering in on specific metrics and what I think would make me feel good. And she stops me and she goes, but are you enjoying it while you're doing it without these metrics, without hitting these numbers? And I go, yeah, absolutely. I talked to all these brilliant people and I'm really enjoying it. I can't believe the conversations that I get to have. And she goes, Galina, you're not trying to convince me. And I was like, oof, okay. Really hit me with that. And it is so hard sometimes, I think, as you were alluding to be able to just let the joy resonate and sit in that joy. And I think for someone who's maybe newer to content creation and they're just getting into it and they're like, all right, let me commit to this. I'm going to start posting. I'm going to start trying to be as much myself as I can with this. Inevitably, they're going to start to face rejection. They're not going to get the types of likes, reposts, shares, whatever, follows that they might want. How do you build up like a tolerance for that type of rejection to someone who hasn't encountered it yet?
Well, I'm cheating because I was an actor for years, and still would like to return back to Broadway at some point. And so was professionally rejected for couldn't tell you how many years and couldn't tell you how many hundreds of times. So I suppose I already had a a callus to uh, shouting into the void. But I can absolutely acknowledge how frustrating, like uniquely so, that feels to be a person who in life, whether you can recognize this consciously or not, that you go through your days feeling like you're not heard, you're not understood, you're not really received by the people around you. To then make content online that also feels like it's not being received then comes across as a confirmation and affirmation of the deep seated belief you have that you don't matter and that nobody cares. And it takes, honestly, I was going to give a timeline, but it really just takes however long it takes for you to understand that it actually doesn't matter if anybody cares. Sure, in the long run, like, yes, you want to build the audience, the community, you want people to engage, but you have to care so unbelievably deeply about what you're posting and what you're saying, because for a long time people might not hear you and people might not care. But unless you care and you see the fuck out of yourself and are posting and stand by what you say, I don't really see any other reason why anybody else would. And that's always my issue. It's like when people say to me, it's like really truly the downfall of any conversation with me, because the moment you get into like these mindset blocks and fear and imposter syndrome, like part of me checks out because I'm so tired of having those conversations. And it's just not about that person. I just have had them so many times over the last 3 years that I'm like, I'm not the guy. Like, I'm not ultimately the guy to work with you on mindset. Like, you're going to be afraid. You're going to feel like an imposter. Let's fucking do it anyway. I'm here for progress and I'm here for action. Um, and where in the fuck was I even going? Uh, I was like, I feel really strongly about that. Um, it's when somebody invokes me, like, I just don't see why anybody would care about what I'm putting out there. My response is like, well, if you've made that decision already that what you have to put out there is unimportant or boring, like it certainly is. It absolutely is. So then I want no part of it. I need you to show up as delusional as I was and am and be like, no, I've got something to share. I've got something to say. I don't know exactly who it's going to reach or what it needs to do, but I have something to say. That's like a prerequisite for working with me. It's a prerequisite for me being interested in your journey because with complete candor, it's like I don't care. And I say that really so brusquely, but in the future I know that me and my team will put out content and more products and courses and whatever for the folks who are earlier on the timeline. I'm not saying I don't care about you as a person. I've just had to be really careful about where I zoom in for my live time because I've spent 3 years building this thing and I've worked too hard to now be in Zoom rooms or do anything that I don't want to do. Um, and so there's just certain clients in terms of like one-on-one connection that I don't work with because it's like you're not yet there where I want to be, where I want to be spending my time, and like get there using all the other free fucking things I put out there, and then we can maybe do this. But I'm not going to drag you kicking and screaming through this. Absolutely not. There's like there's no amount of money you could pay me.
No, that's good that you value your time because I think that's like a fundamental lesson for the people who enter the room and like begin to work with you. And it kind of goes back to something you said in your TED talk, which was, I'm only as forgettable as I allow people to make me feel. So if you're going in and you're like, I don't care about this, who will care about this? You know, that's you're missing the forest for the trees or the trees for the, whatever the expression is, right? It's like, I'm passionate about this, so I believe that whatever amount of time it takes for the audience to catch on, and kind of the way that I frame it for myself in doing something that is taking longer than I wanted to build, but is building, is that whenever people do find me, and it's not if, it's when, whenever people do find me, there's already now this massive portfolio of work that I have. Like, what a blessing that it didn't take off on the first video. What a blessing that I now have just like all of these things for people to come and discover and spend substantial time on that I've already done, right?
I also say to people too, I'm like, you all clamor for views. All you want is views. And I'm like, you bitches are so lucky no one's seeing the shit you're putting out. Like, I just think it's so funny. I'm just like, your content is fully bad. Like, why are you so obsessed with getting views? You're not going to get them with this bad content. And people might be listening to this being like, my God, he is so intense about this. I'm like, kind of, but you have to understand how many that like thousands of people I have come into contact with, or how many people every day ask me to go look at their content and whatever. And I'm like, this is bad. You are just lip syncing, or not even that. You're just doing trends. Like, you've never spoken to the camera. And then you're like wondering why you're not growing, or you're telling me you're shadow banned. And I'm like, you're not even in the arena. You're not, you don't even have gloves on yet. So what the fuck? And then you're wanting these views. I'm like, so that they can what? Watch you be just like every other person out there. There are millions of people on these platforms, babe. You don't want the views right now, I promise you. So I agree with you. Not only a blessing to build up that portfolio, but hone your skill set. This is also like, become a better storyteller. Like, zoom in on who the fuck you are and use this time of relative anonymity to do some of the deeper digging that you don't want people to fucking see necessarily.
Yeah. What do you define as bad content besides what you just said, like the unoriginal stuff?
That's the most aggressive to me. Um, because like, as long as you're trying, like, right, as long as I watch a lot of people because people mention me or tag me in their videos all the time. I'm proud as fuck for like strangers all the time who are like, I saw this guy, Justin Schuman, and he talks about doing just these one take videos where it's all about learning to trust what you're feeling and what you're saying. And I'm like, good on you, bitch. Go the fuck off. Like, I am so proud of these people. That is intrinsically excellent content, right? Is it maybe the most strategic or optimized? No, which I don't care about. that is just goodness to me. So I'm not talking about like, oh, you're stuttering or stammering or it's taking a long time to get to your thought. No, if you are participating and you're in the arena, that's incredible content. Of course, we can make it better, but you know what I mean. I'm talking about people who, like I said, are unoriginal or have fallen into all of the traps of the templates and the formulas and the hooking people in the first 3 seconds. And it's just so unbelievably clear to me how distanced they are from whoever they actually are. That's bad. That's upsetting to me. That's an insult to your humanity. And I don't like that. Uh, Overtly silly content, I'm not a big fan of. Content that's devoid of emotion, like on LinkedIn, or like so overly formulaic or clearly written by AI. Bad, bad content, right? I'd like to think that my compass, though, is really tuned and not in the sense of like, that hook wasn't so catchy, right? Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm really talking about like, well, this had no heart or soul. So
Yeah. Talk to me about the connection, because I've seen you make this connection that creating your own content and being yourself in front of the camera is a form of therapy. Can you just speak more to that?
yeah, I mean, I literally posted a piece today where I actually argued that content was more productive than therapy. And I was like, let's see who shows up to this one. And I'll caveat this, of course, by saying, like, I'm in therapy. I love therapy. I'm in somatic therapy right now, and it's incredible. And I've learned a great deal in a short amount of time. My biggest point is that you can do all the therapy in the world, you can journal all you'd like, and you might put some pieces together and do some internal suturing and sewing up of old wounds until you take some of that internal healing and externalize it. I would argue that, are you really all that healed? Because you're still living the life of an unhealed person because you haven't changed anything. Your behavior, your words, your actions haven't manifested any differences in your life. And content, if we go back to this idea of like social media as a parallel, as a simulation, a simulacrum even of real life, it's like you have these opportunities to step out onto this stage and inhabit yourself purposefully, making a bunch of decisions of what do I want to say and what do I want to talk about and how long do I want to talk about it, and am I going to allow myself to go off on tangents? And am I making this for me or am I making this for other people? And I don't know if I've niched down enough. There's so many decisions you need to make in the arena of social media that I'm telling you, it's like that's a form of publicly self defining you. And with the layer on top of it of the acknowledgement that you're going to be witnessed, you are going to want to lean back on old habits so fucking hard because you're a people pleaser. I promise you this, listener. And the sway to be what you think other people want you to be is going to be unbelievably entrancing. And um, the gravitational pull back to old ways is very present on social media. So therapy and journaling and introspection, meditation, etc., are all wonderful, great modalities. But if you never externalize any of the internal healing, if a tree falls in the forest and no one's around to hear it, right? That to continue on our use of tree and forest metaphors. Uh, it's amazing the shifts I've watched people I've worked with go through over a really short amount of time. Like 3 months is the typical container I work with somebody. And I've seen these people go through unbelievable transformations, which is a word I really hate to use because I think it's been co opted by like a very coachy community. But putting yourself out there and saying this shit, like verbalizing it and then processing the things that you're saying and simultaneously digging deep and saying the things. And it creates this cycle that really up levels people very, very, very quickly. So, in that way, I think that content is potentially more productive, outwardly speaking, than therapy, knowing that therapy is, of course, very important and content is not the place to be trauma dumping or re-traumatizing oneself, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, absolutely. I just really appreciate the externalizing the lessons, because yeah, if you're saying, oh, I learned this and I did all this healing work, blah blah blah, like let's see it, right? Like,
Mm-hmm. Let's see it. And also, let's see how your actions and behaviors are different than the person you've been. Because if you do what you always did, you get what you always got. But like to change your life, you have to do new things.
If someone doesn't see the point of posting online because their intention isn't to monetize, I would assume a lot of the people that you're working with are trying to monetize it. But why should people who aren't in the business of social media still be posting?
Yeah. It's interesting you say that actually. A lot of the people I work with are not immediately looking for monetization. In fact, that's a huge component for the people I look to work with because, to be honest, the folks who are most eager to monetize most immediately are probably in a position of like financial desperation, which I have no judgment toward, but it creates a really tight grip around the being of self. And also, there's so much nonsense on social that um, in a slightly predatory way goes after the people who want to make money tomorrow, and so that's actually like not my bag. I can help people make money online, like this work absolutely results in that, but that's not the primary thing that I love to talk about. I've built a successful business, so of course I can disseminate some of that information and assist and guide. However, I go back to what I said earlier, which is you have this tool in your pocket that is free, and if you really don't care and you don't really want to grow anything or build anything, that's totally fucking fine. Then do it for you. It's an opportunity to be yourself publicly with these stakes. It's like going to the personality gym. Like, fine. If you don't care so fucking much, then just use it as a tool. I also will acknowledge and say out loud that I think that a lot of the people who don't care, it's really like a story they've told themselves, because if they did let themselves care, then it does mean they have to do all this work and they have to participate in this thing that they've long felt very cringy and blah 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 blah. So I think a lot of it is stories, but I mean, I'm also not here to advocate for like I can't wait for the entire world to be on TikTok. I don't really give a fuck. I just I've said since 2022 in my TEDx talk that like social media is here and it's not going anywhere, and I was correct. Like it's only more deep. We're only more deeply enmeshed, and our daily lives are imbued with social constantly. So you can ignore it. And I wonder how that's going for you. Or you can acknowledge it's here, it's not going anywhere. So we can learn to use these things a bit more, with a bit more agency. And hopefully they wouldn't be quite as damaging, for especially for like young people. Because like thank God I didn't have Instagram or shit when I was in high school.
Oh, me too.
Fuck. That would have been brutal. It was already bad. Like that would have been worse.
Absolutely. What does it look like from your POV when someone seems to be desperate to monetize? How does that create
Oh,
blocks?
it's so upsetting. And I mean that in a way of like compassionately saying that, because it's I mean, I've had to be the guy on opposite of calls to be like, you recognize you're in like an MLM, right? Like you recognize you're in a pyramid thing, and the people are like, no, 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 no. This is very different because I have a team, and the team beneath me, like they can all have teams, and I'm like, keep going, keep telling me about it, and it is like funny because people then always harken back to that moment in the office when it's about the pyramid scheme, but it's sad to see how easily taken people can be when they are in that desperate spot. And I mean, we could do a whole hour just on money and the blocks there, et cetera. But it's usually people who are clinging to the idea of niching down, faceless content, all of the like most industrial best practices that people offer, of like the perfectly optimized bio and the IG highlights and the this and the this and the this. And so it manifests as people who are just gripping. I mean, I get the DMs constantly of like, I'm trying to build a business and blah 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 blah, but like there's no clear business, or rather like I'm trying to resell these courses, or like I'm an affiliate for these 5 different things, and like those things aren't their own IP, they're other people's. And I'm like, if you're going to put yourself out there or put yourself on the line to sell some shit, like why don't you sell your own shit as opposed to other people's? Like it makes no sense to me. But I get it. If you got to pay the rent tomorrow and there's somebody out there on the internet telling you that you can make $10,000 a month by just selling this course and having this landing page, which there are people out there saying things like that, you want to believe that's true. And it's, yeah, it's just very sad to me. And I don't want to be a part of that at all. And I would argue too, it's the there's been a sort of layer or a level that I've not been willing to quote unquote stoop to, Um, and I think I could have probably grown faster or sold more if I was willing to lean more into the monetization language or the make money fast. But it's so untrue. I mean, like I've worked 3 fucking years at this, and it's been really hard. And I make good money, but it is not on autopilot by any means, in the slightest. And I could have made some smarter business decisions that would have had this more on autopilot and had more systems that were making me passive income. But my God, this has not been easy. And I would never say it was.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like those types of models, the ones that trick people into thinking they're going to get paid tomorrow, are probably also the more likely ones to create burnout because if you're making stuff and you're just trying to get from point A to point B and it's not really about what you're doing as opposed to what you're earning, it's just easy to experience burnout anyways, even when you are a creator who's being authentic. Like, what kinds of workarounds do you recommend when you see someone doing it and it's not even for the sole purpose of making money, they're just burning out?
Well, if it's not for the sole purpose of making money, I suppose, because I was going to say it's like difficult. I don't want to be the person who tells somebody like, don't do that, especially if they're like, I need money tomorrow. I'm like, who the fuck am I to tell you what you should or should not do? Like, I get it. You got to feed your family. You got to try and do what you got to do. Um, I don't know. To be honest, like you said, it's even easy to potentially reach burnout even if you are creating content from a place of authenticity. And I guess I don't totally agree, only because content to me is a joy. Like the work comes from the business building of it. But if I never really built a business out of this, like this would be very stress free. Now, of course, I like that I built a business and I love money and like I want more of it. So there is pressure. I have a team of 4 under me. The overhead for my business is not low. Um, but I love content creation. Like I love it so much. It doesn't make me stressed. And it doesn't uh, hurdle me toward burnout in the same way that some other things in my past have. And so I think that if you're creating content and it does genuinely feel as a natural extension of yourself, I don't know if it results in burnout necessarily. I'm not saying that like you could be a person who's like posting 8 times a day because you think that's what you're supposed to be doing and maybe it's all super authentic, but like no bitch, that's also not the answer. Like that will have you feeling completely beside yourself, exhausted. But I'm saying if you're reasonable about this and post consistently and not obsessively, and the content itself does feel pretty easy to make because it's a genuine extension of who you are, I think it's actually the antidote for burnout.
I like that a lot. It kind of frames the burnout in and of itself as a red flag to what you're doing and ways that you can shift around it. Do you have specific ideas about posting rhythms? Like what kinds of schedules people should be trying to shoot for?
No, not really. I mean, people ask me all the time, how much should I be posting? When should I be posting? And I don't think for a second about posting times for myself at all. And I kind of operate under a cadence of at least once a day, but that's because it's become so ingrained in me and habitual at this point. And I have a business to run. So it is a part of my job to make content that makes people aware that I exist and this is what I do. And uh, I said it before, but posting consistently, not obsessively, is what I'm most adamant about because it goes back to what we first started talking about is the moment something happens, the moment you think you need to do something out of obligation is the moment the joy starts to fall away. And so, you know, I think I've had a gentle obsession with being like omnipresent and on all of the platforms as visible as I can be for a little too long. And I think that's probably actually slowed me down as opposed to just choosing one platform to start on and get comfy with. But people love to ask these questions as well. And then I'm like, okay, well, when's the last time you posted? And they're like, oh no, well, I haven't started yet. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. You just want to really make sure you got all your ducks in a row before you do it. Yeah. And so, I could always tease back and be like, any posting is better than none. So it's funny when I get asked those questions, but I think people want to place so much more weight on the best practices and the timing and the hashtags and all this because, you know, then there's things they have to learn before they start. And also like, well, there's just things that are out of my hands, like it was a bad posting time. And I'm like, no, your content was shit. But like, okay, cool. Yeah. No, 8 p.m. What a terrible time.
Everyone's on their phones every waking minute of every day.
Yeah, yeah, you could probably, yeah, it's crazy the things that people are wanting to. It's crazy how fast people are willing to give their power away to an algorithm that they'll never see or never know. And I'm like, wow, you're so comfortable with this math formula governing your life, and I'm just not. Cool. But that's just a different, you have to shift that paradigm. And I'm trying 3 years. I mean, I've been yelling this message for 3 years, and it's good. We're making progress. But like, I'm largely battling an internet that is saying the opposite to me every single day.
Yeah, the algorithm is like this big bad be all power that people are like, how do I work with it? And how do I find it? How do the algorithm? Everything is the algorithm's fault, or everything is because of the algorithm. The answer to this might be very similar to what your last answer was, but I'm wondering for someone who does commit to it and maybe they are posting daily and they're not, let's just use like gardening as an example. Maybe it's gardening content, maybe they have a business that's relevant, maybe not, maybe it's just a passion project. How do you overcome this kind of what feels like pressure online to either, speak to every crisis that's happening? Like people want everyone to have opinions on everything political these days, and if you're just not that creator at all that has anything to do with that, how do you keep posting in the face of crisis? Like, oh no, the Texas floods just happened. Who gives a shit about my, gardening content? Like, how do you overcome those hurdles?
Yeah, I think it's a lot to hold at once. And I think, like, yeah, for folks in Texas, no, they do not care about your gardening right now. They care about, 27 girls at a camp that aren't going to go home to their families, right? It's intense. I'm not sure that number is 100% correct, but yeah, there's tragedy all over the world every single day. And I think that you have to be a person. This is me. This is my personal answer. You have to be a person who can hold both, right? And when I feel compelled enough to speak on something, I do. And there's a lot of people out there who are like, well, if I post my gardening content, I'm taking away valuable space from other voices that need to be heard. And I'm like, that's simply just not true. That's not how these platforms work. And I try to remember that in my small way, although it's not ending a war in Ukraine, which I'm just physically not capable of doing by myself. I would do it if I could, y'all. I'm doing the good that I can do. And if something is so overwhelmingly bad that I don't know what to do with it, or I don't, or that sort of sadness or badness or tragedy is hits close to home for me, no, I'm probably not going to push through. I might take a day off, or I might just out of respect, right? And I've done this because sometimes it just feels in poor taste. But it's a discretion thing. It's a discretion and discernment thing. And I think that folks with really, really, really large platforms have more to worry about. I think if I had millions of followers, this would be something that was more on my mind and something that I would probably have to navigate more intimately. I'm not quite there yet. Uh, I think I have just enough visibility that I could get some flack for it, but I don't because I do think I navigate this with as much tact as I can. But yeah, you can't ignore the fact that the world is on fire constantly, and we are living the last 8 years of our lives have been quote unquote unprecedented times constantly. So um, it's a lot to hold. I don't know. I don't think I have a neat answer for it. I just think there's a lot to consider when you are putting yourself out there. You have to recognize the zeitgeist and the information highway that day contains a lot of other shit.
Absolutely. If I'm trying to be authentically myself, but I am in a position where things are monetized and I have to kind of stick to the avenues that my audience has come to expect, what's like the best way to turn the marketing brain off when making stuff and just kind of staying in a place where I'm just talking, I'm just saying my things, but like marketing brain kind of finds a way to insert itself in the content creation process?
Yeah. Um, you know, the answer to your question would actually be like a band-aid of a symptom, because really my question becomes back to you is like, why in this hypothetical situation, why do you feel like there's certain avenues you need to stick to that only those avenues result in sales? Because if that's the case, you have quote unquote niched down, in my estimation, too far, that you haven't bought yourself the space to talk about anything. And I'll say out loud right now, if you go look at my accounts, a lot of people are like, but you have a niche. And I'm like, I'm really so thrilled that you're so comfortable with labeling my account. And I love that for you. And I will tell you that I feel not an iota of a discomfort about posting skincare or fitness or talking about Broadway. And I'm like, tell me I fucking niche down when I do not feel like I've been put in a box. You're going to decide what my account is. You're going to tell me what it is. And so, what I'm also really grateful for is I could do a piece about Broadway and the fact that I was on it and talking about um, what it's like to stand off stage before you're like swinging on for a role on Broadway for the first time and like running lines in your head, and draw a parallel to maybe a quick mention of like it's sort of what it feels like when you're about to go on camera and blah 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 blah. And my clients love when I talk about this because I tend to work with clients who have some sort of love or you know connection to theater, and that I could never mention it again in that piece. I could just continue talking about Broadway and my swinging experience and what I was doing at the time. But now I work with clients. If you are into the story I'm telling and I meet you at the timeline in your life when you need someone like me, and you happen to go to my profile and you happen to apply to work with me, right? It's like storytelling is enough. It is enough, but you have to make sure that what the people are coming for is you, not just the information you provide. And so it's difficult for me to answer your question only because it's a signifier of a larger, um, perhaps, gap that's worth digging into, as opposed to just being like, well, symptomatically asking the marketing brain to check out. It's hard. It's really
Mhm.
hard.
Yeah, it definitely is. And I think to an extent, it also is hard to turn the inspiration brain off if you're borrowing from other people a lot. And like, how do I know, oh, this is my authentic idea. This is really feels good to me and feels like my thing versus, oh, I just borrowed it because it's like a trend.
Mm. I don't know if I've ever really considered that. I don't scroll a ton, I will
Mm.
say. I spend so much time on these platforms doing that I'm just like, I don't really like. I of course I scroll. Like I'm not saying I'm above it, but like I watch like food content and makeup content and travel content. Like I'm not making that shit anyway. And so, but I'm not watching people post about content creation because I could give two fucks. And I'm like, I don't care what they have to say. And I'm in my own lane and I believe in what I say. And so I guess what my a shorter answer is I trust that if I were to bring something up, because you could also stand over here and be like, no idea is original, right? Everything's been said before, right? 88 keys on a piano, every song's existed, the whole thing. But I believe that if it comes out of my mouth and I add my IP and my unique experiences and my story and my opinion to it, then that piece hasn't existed before. Even if the hook maybe sounds eerily similar to what somebody else might have said on complete accident, right? Uh, I was gonna say knock on wood, but I don't think I'm in danger of it. I've never once had anyone be like, "Wow, this sounds a lot like what this other person said," and I'm like, it just hasn't happened because one, I'm not borrowing, and two, no, it doesn't. Like, no, it fucking doesn't because I spoke truth to what I experienced or what I was thinking, and I think that's why I'm also so adamant about articulating the thoughts that feel hard to articulate. Like, find it, find the words, right? Because if you have to find the words in your head, chances are nobody else has said them in that order before.
I like that because it really just points to a block that people are probably running into that they may or may not consciously be aware of. But that's a really good block to then work on to get past this stuff of, oh, am
Mm,
I worried that somebody else said this before? How do I really feel about it? And then just letting it pour out of you like verbal diarrhea.
yeah, I forgot about, I mean, yes, you're right. I forgot that that's a pain point people express, which is somebody else has said it before and better than me. I'm like, okay, like it doesn't even register or pervade my consciousness. But yeah, you're right. That is a huge block for people.
I'm curious, Justin, where do you find your wisdom? Are there like teachers or work that you turn to? And how did you figure out all this stuff?
Honestly, I'm an experimenter. Like I don't know if anybody out there is into human design, but I'm a 3-5, and trial and error is like, and this is only like in the last year and a half, I've learned more about my astrology and human design, but I do find it endlessly fascinating. I'm always been a trial and error person, and now that I know it's like astrologically part of who I am, I lean in even more. And it's like I just sort of honor that if an investment or something is 3 grand to do something, but like I really feel the need to learn whatever that experience is going to feel like, or I do it, right? And so my wisdom comes from a lot of mistake making, like a lot of mistake making and story living and reflection and verbalizing this stuff out loud. Like I've said things over the course of today's hour that I don't think I've said before. And I'm like, oh, that's great. Like, oof, that's wonderful. Like, I can't, we should go pull that quote and use it. Blah, blah, blah. But like, I don't really, like, I will let unfinished thoughts be heard. I don't mind.
Mm.
And, because I'm not the person who's standing here saying I'm so polished and perfect and whatever. I'm just telling you, like, I'm literally giving you what I have when I have it. So if it's fucking ripe and ready, awesome. And if it's like half baked, well, that's what we're working with right now. I don't really care. So I think, like, I don't read enough, frankly, and so that's why I'm not trying to be here like I'm Merlin, the content wizard. I'm just saying that I speak mostly from my experiences because I don't have a lot of time, which is a story. I could make time to read and stuff, but I don't have any mentors or books or resources that I turn to right now. I've always just been kind of like an old soul, and so I think I'm just leaning into a little bit of sage and like aged wisdom that exists inside of me somewhere. And we all have our magic and our gifts, and I think this is one of mine. um yeah, it comes to me very, very, very naturally.
That's incredible. You're just able to express vulnerability and then learning from it as you go.
Yeah, I mean, so people tell me, I don't know, my therapist will always be like, wow, that's a really beautiful, like, big thought you just shared. And I'm like, is it? Okay. Like, and I'm not in a rude way to my therapist, but it's almost a running gag between us at this point that he'll be like, yeah, that was like a really fearless moment. And I'm like, it was? Okay. Like, to me it was like a Wednesday. So I appreciate that. I just think that I when I say don't care, I mean I really don't care. Like, I cared for so long, and now I just don't. If you don't like something that I say, but I like what I said, fuck you. Like, I don't care. I just don't care. I don't have the time. I spent so many years being so small to make so many people happy. I'm just like, I'm not doing that anymore.
Final question. Can you give me a little baby step piece of advice for someone who's embarking on their journey of content creation?
I feel like I always try to answer this question in a novel way because part of me doesn't really believe any of the steps are baby. I think that's part of the truth. And maybe that's even the step. It's like the piece of advice I'll offer, because this resonated with somebody I shared it with earlier this week, is stop thinking that there's an arrival point or that there is a day marked on the calendar that the universe is like, you're going to feel ready, Sheila. Like, you're just not. You're just not. You're never going to feel ready. So the baby step is like, put something out there. And if you're like, I cannot put my face on the camera, like, fine, go on Threads, type a story, like, put put your thoughts and your opinions that exist inside of your head and your body into the public consciousness in some capacity, and then, like, walk the fuck away. There is really no other baby step, because I always say to people, like, you're either in the pool or you're not. You don't have to get soaked. You don't have to be. You don't have to get in and like dunk your head underwater and go swim in the deep end. But like, you're in the pool or you're on the fucking chaise lounge. So at least get your feet in, right? Um, you're either sharing something or you're not. And that's why I struggle a little bit with like what's the first step? I'm like, do it scared. So if anybody is starting, uh, don't make it an ongoing verb. Just start. Let it be a moment. You start, you're in, and then you're in it.
Amazing. Justin Schuman, if people want to work with you, where can they find out more?
My goodness, I'm so grateful you asked. If you want to work with me, I've tried to make this as lean and simple as possible. Honestly, for me, because it's what I love doing most, I really am just working with one-on-one clients at this point, and I acknowledge out loud it is not inexpensive. but it is really high touch, and I'm really good at what I do, and I'm pretty selective about who I work with. But you can find me on social, on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, etc. I'm Justin Schuman, Schuman. Human is, in fact, in my last name. On most platforms, I'm Justin Schuman Official. I will be jumping back onto YouTube before the end of the year, which I'm really excited about. And in any of my bios, you can click the link and apply to work with me, and a member of my team will get in contact with you. And if anything at all resonated with you after listening today, please feel free to follow and shoot me a DM. I do my best to respond to as many as I can, but it's just meaningful to me to know that something I shared landed or helped.
Well, it certainly landed for me in our talk. So thank you again for coming on today.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Galina. I appreciate it.
Of course. And thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye. All right, I'll stop the recording there. That was awesome.